Hello, everyone. This is Robyn, and I am so very excited to have this time with one of my absolute favorite Canadian singer-songwriters, the one and only Peter Katz. So Peter, welcome to our virtual book tour. I am so excited to spend the next wee while with you to this day. So thank you for being here.
It's my pleasure, Robyn. You're one of my favorite humans, so I'm always happy to spend time with you.
Oh, thank you so very much. And as folks might have come upon, one of the highlights and really bright blessings of the opportunity to launch my book that came out this past March was also to work with Peter to create a theme song for the book. I wanted this wee little book to have an anthem. And when I imagined what that collaboration possibly could be, Peter was the person that I was so excited to ask, and he said
All
yes.
right, let me know when you press play.
I'm hitting play.
Every tear and every bruise and every pain, I've been hurricane. Every wreckage in the wind and what remains, every miracle. Like the winter when I went off of the road, felt the darkness of the water and cold. But I decided I'm not dying alone, and her voice could carry me home to the calm within the storm that I'd been living in, and to all I had to learn through every hard thing. My mother tried in so many ways, telling it to me every day, until I learned on my own to say I am okay. Doesn't mean just 'cause we can carry it well that it's not a heavy load. There's a world of people that you could never tell are barely breathing now.
So here we are now, Peter. So yeah, so some folks had asked us about like what this was like, what was this process like? So I thought we could spend some time together talking about how this came to be and just what this means to us and how it builds community.
I'd love to do that, and
Okay.
I'm really curious, how you came up with the idea of even having a theme song, because that's obviously something I've never done. So maybe we could start there.
Yeah, great question. I think it's actually funny to acknowledge that both Peter and I are used to being interviewed, and here we're doing this like stick handling of trying to interview one another. So usually we're responding. So just bear with us as we navigate our way through this time together. But yeah, so what got this started? So first and foremost, I have the deepest appreciation for music. I love music. Music has been like a catalog of my different experiences, different places I've traveled. I love theme songs. Like that is my favorite. Like movie soundtracks are actually something that has brought me through really interesting times and journeys in my life, Peter. I really like John Williams, Hans Zimmer, like their music like speaks to my soul. And I think about that notion of like experiences or like a movie, how you hear that music and it just brings all of it together. And I always was curious about what would if I had a book or I had a piece of art, what would that soundtrack be like? What would that feel like? What would it sound like? And so I always think in the back of my mind that I wanted to pair music, and I'm not a music person. So I always just have held such reverence for folks who are. Yeah, so I just, every season of my life has had a theme song. Every kind of episode of my life has had a theme song that I've leaned into. I have some pretty amazing playlists that literally capture moments and seasons of my life. And so music is very important to me. And I wanted this book to have a theme song because I believe it actually creates community. It brings us together. When we hear that music, it actually helps us all come to equal footing and grounding. So that's why I thought about my book having a theme song.
Awesome. Well, I'm so glad that you asked me to to be part of creating that. It was yeah, I kind of love writing with parameters, you know, like so much of the songwriting process sometimes is just you're just kind of mining the universe, and you're just being like, okay, what's happening? And you know, I feel like, you know, creativity kind of like goes in these waves, and there's some moments where, you know, you can't get it out fast enough, and there's other times where you're like, okay, I'm just gonna go to the well and, you know, lower the bucket and hope something comes up. But I loved in this process that I had this sort of guide, that I was like, okay, my job here is to serve Robyne, and is to serve the words, the message, the spirit, the soul of this book. That, you know, that when I read this book, I'm getting emotional just thinking about it again. You know, I as I told you, you know, I took this book on a hike in Algonquin Park, and I would wake up every morning, and I would just go down, you know, to the water and lay on the rocks and read your book. And most of the time there were, you know, tears streaming down my face, and it's just so beautiful. And so I just wanted to honor it, and I wanted to channel you. And so that's a gift to have those sort of the lane that I'm in. You know, it's not like I'm just writing a song about anything. It's like, and it's also a great responsibility, because you know, I wanna do you justice. And so I loved the process though, and I loved just kind of taking my time with it and going back to the book and rereading it. And, you know, one of the people might not know, but one of the exercises that I had you do, you know, you'd already written an entire book, but I still made you do some more writing. And that was, you know, just to do some free writing. And that's often a writing exercise that, you know, if I'm ever like doing a songwriting workshop or whatever, I have people just write. And the rule is that you're not allowed to stop writing. You have to just like set a timer and write for a set period of time. And just when you think it's time to stop, you write a little more. And that piece of writing that you wrote for me, you know, just about the book and what it meant for you, and what, you know, you really wanted to communicate to people. That was one of the most beautiful pieces of writing that I've ever read. And I mined so much of that. You did a lot of the heavy lifting for me. I just had to kind of put the puzzle pieces together.
Oh my goodness, Peter, that's so incredibly kind of you to say. And I need to know that writing exercise was a doozy. That was a doozy, that free flow writing, because so much, I think, happens that we intellectualize our work, right? That we think that it has to sound a particular way. And it was just such an amazing opportunity, really, to explore outside of that intellectual realm and just sit with feelings. And what feelings did I want this book to elicit for persons? And what I feel so proud about, Peter, is when I hear people share back to us that like that song made them feel, and it echoed throughout the pages of that book. To me, that's extraordinary. If we can make people feel, and the feelings that they're feeling are feeling encouraged or even emboldened, what a gift that we get to do this work. whether it be in music or whether it be in writing or speaking. Just the fact that we can be of service to persons, especially during such a season of uncertainty. This feels just so extraordinary. Very, very extraordinary.
I
Yeah.
agree. I feel like the moment where I felt like, okay, um, I got it right,
Yeah.
which is always such a hard thing in the
Yeah.
creative process, because you're like, is it done? Is it good
Yeah.
enough? Can I fix this?
Yeah.
Do I change this word? But when I shared that email with you that I got from that woman
Yeah.
who had a, teenage daughter, about the same age as what you're describing
Yeah.
yourself at that
Yeah.
time in the book, who
Yeah.
had a very similar experience, and
Mhm.
she emailed me and she said, something to the effect of like, I don't know how you did it, but like you wrote my daughter's story, and she didn't know your story yet,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
they were just like so parallel.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh wow, what a special thing that like Robin like creates this thing, and then I try to like distill this thing into something else,
Yeah.
and then somebody over here here's this thing that I've created and
Yeah.
is like, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
that's me, and yet it's Robin,
Yeah.
and I was like, that is like such a amazing energy exchange, and
Yes. Yeah.
I loved hearing
That is
that.
so powerful. And the one person on the planet who I believe is my knowledge holder is my father. My father is the person in my life who has seen me obviously from day one all the way up to now. And other people have come in and out of my life obviously at different times, but my father, Michael, he's my knowledge holder, and he has been so instrumental, Peter, in my growth, in my learning, in my recovery, about this idea that our lessons really, when you go down deep, there's a universal component to it. And the more specific you get, the more relatable it is to other people, because we're hitting the core. And my father often talked to me as I was going through my recovery about the fact that like these trials, these challenges, you will be a beacon of hope, Robyne, when you get to the other side. And, so for him to have first heard your song, Peter, and to have, obviously read my book now, and for that story to go full circle where a woman is being, encouraged for her daughter, to me, that's something that, my father promised me that one day that could happen, that one day the kind of bumps and bruises and the derailment that I experienced could be of service. And you're sharing that, you're showing that, and that's grateful. And as a side little note, I want you to tell you, like, to be able to send my father that song, that also is, one of the greatest honors of your song is that you honored my mother, who was so instrumental in my recovery and in my life. The fact that you brought Leslie into that song, and then I could share it with my father, and we could create a new memory about my mom. That was so special. And as I shared with you before, my mother is who inspired my love of music. She always had such good music playing in the house, like and the car, like she loved music and lots of different types of it. And the fact that I know she's not here, but the fact that she's captured in a song, that is so special. That's really special.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, it was pretty
Yeah.
special to share it with my
There you
mom
go.
as well, because
Awesome.
there were themes that I really resonated with, and my mom has said to me on several occasions in my life, she said, she's like, I wish you could just see you the way I see you, and the way that so many other people see you. And
Yeah.
she's, you're so hard on yourself,
Yes.
and like you're wonderful, like,
Yeah.
um, and and I feel like I was sort of channeling, my mother tried in so many ways telling it to me every day
Yeah.
until I learned on my own to say, I'm okay. Like those words were about me and my mom as well. And so
Yeah.
it was a pretty special thing to send it to her. Although my mom did not have good musical taste. There was a lot of Zampier pan flutes in my house.
Oh my gosh, there you go. That's awesome. And I hope your mom liked it as well. I'm sure she did, because
She
I'm
loved
sure
it.
she's
Yeah.
so proud of you, Peter. Gosh, I gotta tell you, the love a parent has for their child, it's something else. And I love that my mother used to always joke that she loved us all uniquely and completely, right? Love looks different. And I can say, as a mother of three, you love them completely but differently. Like, it's unique in each of that. And but again, there's that universality to the fact that a mother sees our potential, right? A parent sees what we're capable of. And I think, as a parent myself, my wish and how I want to live hope filled is that the children come upon that for themselves, that they
Yeah.
see just how significant and special that they are. And I always joke that I love my kids more than evolution requires, right? Like, I'm actually like stupid in love with those three kiddos, and they're my greatest teachers. I have learned more about compassion, forgiveness, grace, mercy, strength, by the relationship I get to have with those children.
Well,
Yeah.
that comes
So
in the pages of the book as well. So
yeah. Yeah, that's it's very special. And Peter, I'm so curious about when you have created a craft like the song, and then
yeah.
you like kind of send it out into the world. Is there almost like an intention that you set to where you want that to go, or what you want people to know or learn or experience from it when you offer your gifts so generously into the world? What's that like?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the work is on the front end, and
Mm,
like you were talking about with your father and the
yeah,
specificity, it's
yeah,
like it's my job to infuse as much as I can into the thing. And you're absolutely right. The specificity is the key. The
yeah,
more, like, not everybody is going to see themselves in it,
That know
but
when you're burning.
when you are really specific, the people that do see
mhm,
themselves in it are going to think, how did you know? And
yeah,
that's kind of what you want.
yeah,
And so I I am certainly a creator who obsesses. I don't want to use the word obsess because it's
yeah,
like has this negative connotation,
yeah,
but like in in a way that I love, and it challenges me, more than most things on earth challenge me, because I'm creating something that doesn't exist. You literally don't know if it's good, if it's
mhm,
done, if it needs this. Like,
yeah,
you just have to, like, very gently. I mean, you wrote an entire book that didn't exist, and then now it's like,
yeah,
oh, I can hold this in my
yeah,
hands, and
yeah,
I literally pulled this out of here, and
yeah,
out of the fairy dust or whatever it is,
yeah,
and so I feel like it's my job to put as much as I can into the source material. And
mm,
with your song, I wrote pages and pages and pages and pages and pages, and I wrote poems, and
yeah,
I had versions of the song, and throughout almost all of it, and then rewrote verses, and did drafts. And so it's just kind of iterating,
yeah,
iterating, iterating until it finally was like, yes,
yeah,
okay. And even in those final moments, it's like one word, one
yeah,
syllable, one thing. But then when you finally get to the point where you, like, put the crayons down, and
yeah,
you're like, here's my drawing, um, then I just I try to release it without attachment,
mhm,
as in
yeah,
it's, again, I hope to love my own child someday. I don't
yeah.
have one yet. Not that I have a child that I don't love. But I I hope to have a child who I love one day. But I imagine
Yeah.
that you can't really wield your control over it.
Yes.
You have to sort of put this trust. And so I
Yes.
feel like when I put a song out in the world,
Yeah.
what matters to me is that I know that I've I've laid it all out, and that
Yes.
I've put everything I have into it.
Hmm.
And then and then I just trust that there's this
Hmm.
little thing out there that, if and when people find it,
Yes.
if and when they give it their their care and their time, they
Hmm.
will find all of that love and that
Yeah.
care that I put into it. Like, it's
Yeah.
there for them. And I think that's part of the hard thing too about, it's like, well, you don't always control the gatekeepers of the music business, or the
Yeah.
gatekeepers
Yeah.
of the Spotify
Yeah.
algorithm, or whatever it is. So
Yes. Yeah.
I just but I with this song, I just trusted, that there was goodness in there, and
Yeah.
it's been amazing to
Yeah.
get some of that feedback back so far.
Yeah, the feedback has been so extraordinary. And I love the fact that people are like, how did you meet? Like, how on earth did this come to be? And I talk often in my work and in my thinking about collaborations and collisions. My favorite collaborations and work projects have always been collisions, like literally just bumping into the right person at the right time to be able to create something pretty amazing. And I love that notion of collaborations and collisions, because usually collisions are associated with a negative, but it's just when these energies align. And I think about, meeting you in the green room in front of the, right before the world shut down, really. It's hard
Yeah,
to believe that was like March 2020. It feels like so long ago. And
yeah,
standing in the green room, getting ready for a speaker spotlight showcase series. And I remember Ron Tite was there, and he was so cool. Like, I remember thinking
yeah.
there's like 500 people. And I remember Melissa was there. She was our just glorious MC. And she was, bopping about. And Ron was just like stoic. And I actually asked him, I actually said, sir, I called him sir, my bad. Apparently, anyways, called him sir. But I said, Ron, Mr. Tite, I'm like, do you get nervous? Like, do you get nervous before this? And he kind of looked at me, and he was just like, and I felt like it was like Rookie was flashing over my head. And he's like, oh no, he's like, no, I'm pretty, I have a good message. And I was like, oh. And then I kind of looked over at you, and like you were doing the little side shuffle. And I was just like, I was about to say, like, how are you feeling? Just to try and do that, like we do that mood congruency, right? Like, are other people a little bit nervous? Like, how are other people doing? And you were just like, I remember you said to me, you're like, because I said, how are you? Like, hi, Peter. And I said, and you said, this is a very exciting opportunity. And like,
Mhm.
as soon as he said that this is an exciting opportunity, I just felt so grounded, right? Like, don't do anything other than just do what you do. And
Yeah.
then Ron's kind of reflection about, like, I have a good message, was like, oh, well,
Mhm.
I do too. And like, I just remember this amazing energy that happened kind of behind the stage. And then we went out and delivered, and both of us did our work. And obviously Ron got the day started for us, which was so cool. But what I love is, like, never in that moment, Peter, would I ever suspect, like, a calendar year later,
Mhm.
Calm Within the Storm would be making its way into the world, with your song, right? Like, I love collaborations and collisions. Those are some of my favorite things to see happen. Yeah, and I know
Yeah.
that's not a question.
No,
Sorry.
no. Actually, funny. I keep that program right here by my
I know.
by my desk, and we're,
Yeah.
here we are, right in there.
Oh, Sir Ron
Really?
Tite and the Peter Katz. I like that.
Yeah. But
Yes.
yeah, it's funny. I remember I felt like I was like, oh, this day is gonna change my life. That's what I
Mm.
felt,
Yeah.
and I didn't realize it was gonna change my life, by getting to do this with you.
Mm.
But I love, um, I love that you sort of picked up on that excited thing, because that's an intentional thing that I do, where so I actually did my degree in theater.
Mm.
And I remember one of my directors saying to us, she said, nervousness is selfishness, because you're just thinking about yourself, and
Wow.
how am I going to be perceived? But what the to sort of go through that nervousness is you think about the collective energy. You think about all
Yeah.
of these people that have come here to receive, and that it's your job to basically get out of your own way and deliver what they've come to receive. And
Mm.
so the way that I interpreted that is that I'm like, okay, the feeling of nervousness and the feeling of excitement physiologically are
Yes.
basically the same. And
100%.
so how do I just reframe, like, just like, if nervousness is right here and excitement is right here, it's just a tiny shift
Yeah.
over to
Yeah.
be like, oh, I'm excited. And then the
Yeah.
excited energy, like nervousness kind of does this and
Mhm.
excited does this. And
I
so
love that.
yeah, I
Gosh, Peter,
use that all.
that's a knowledge bomb, as Sean would say. That's a good one. That's a
Mm.
doozy. I love that. And I really appreciate that. Again, that ties into my research on like the importance of perspective shifts, right? Perspective shifts are transformational when they land. So we can say things to try and shift our feeling or shift our ideas, but if they don't ring truth, then we don't
Mm.
actually have that transformational perspective shift. So I love that, and I think that's such wisdom to share about that idea, that the notion that nervousness really is selfish. It's about the me versus moving it forward to we, and how do I take my gift and share it. And one of my colleagues that I work with, we talk about the difference between talents, skills, and gifts.
Mm.
And obviously, like, you have a gift, like you have skill, definitely, you have innate talent, absolutely, but you have a gift, Peter, of showing up wholeheartedly everywhere you go. Everywhere I've ever seen you or heard you, you show up so wholeheartedly. And that is like just one of the things that I really admire about how you show up in the world. And the other little kind of like gentle kind of idea I can share with that. This is, again, as I shared with you, my children are my greatest teachers. I tell you, they teach me stuff every day, keep me humble as well. But one of the things Hunter said to me, so Hunter, he's our 17-year-old basketball person, and he also was more than sports, but he's had a lot of exposure to some really great coaches. And one time I was talking to Hunter about feeling a little bit tired. I was feeling depleted and I had another event that I had to go to. And Hunter said to me, he said, Mom, one of my favorite coaches told me that you got to bring enthusiasm. Just bring the enthusiasm and the energy will flow. And he said, as soon as you step into that venue, as soon as you step on, in his case, the court, or my case, the stage, he said, like, literally embrace that enthusiasm and like show up because people are counting on you. And
Mm.
I love that kind of idea, because to me that goes very much hand in hand, where that energy is something it's a gift that we can give. And when we
Mm.
bring it in with some enthusiasm, I think it helps the message get across. It helps with delivery, which I think is so important. And another thing, while I'm on the track of just admiring Peter's work and your gifts, what I also see too, Peter, is that it's like there's something pretty amazing that happens when your personality matches your purpose,
Mm.
and it creates something so significant. And your style of writing and storytelling and sharing is this amazing creation of your personality matching your gifts with your purpose, and then what you're offering to the world is something that is truly transformational for all of us. So that I want to thank you for.
It's my pleasure, Robin.
Mhm.
Really. And uh, one thing that you also gave me in your wishes for the song that I was really
Yeah.
grateful for was, you said that you wanted as soon as people like heard the music to think of like the book, like
Mhm.
that it's like that there's a, yeah, when you like in the commercial world, you hear a little jingle and you think of, a major corporation or whatever it
Yes.
is. So
Yeah.
the first thing I did after you and I had that initial conversation was I sat down at the piano and I was like, okay, we want like a melody here,
Yeah.
and it was like, doo-doo. And as soon
Mhm.
as that came to me, I was like, oh, and I've actually never, I've written a lot of songs, but I've never written a song with that cue. So I feel
Oh,
like that's a that's a cool thing that I'm gonna carry forward. So I want to
that is
thank you
so
for that
cool.
too. Yeah.
That's so good. Okay, so I am just like, I'm just curious. Can I just ask like curiosity questions now?
Sure.
Because like it's funny, people so often people say to me, like, Robyne, you're so like calm and you're just really dialed in. But I know there's also the behind the scenes Robyne, right? Like the messy and the scattered and the deeply needing a to-do list type mentality. So I'm just like curious because you always come across just so grounded. Like what are some of those things that like what are some of those things that might like kind of rock your boat a wee bit, Peter? Because you can't always just be this so zen, like, although I admire it so much, but like what kind of stuff? Like what are those little things that people might not know?
Well, to be clear, that's not always the case. I think, um, although I do feel, with each passing year, I become more steady.
Yeah.
Like less of a like. I feel like anything could happen and
Mm.
I would be okay, and I do feel
Yeah.
that. But I only got there by having some really difficult things happen
Yes.
and finding my way through them. So,
Yeah.
nevertheless, I certainly have um, plenty of moments where I really need to like rely on my mindfulness
Yeah.
and rely on my, whether it's exercise or
Yeah.
healthy eating or whatever the things are that just kind of help me reset. But yeah, I guess I mean the things that tend to, if you're asking like what sort of throws me off,
Yeah.
I think it's sometimes like probably over scheduling is the
Mm.
thing where
Yeah.
I just every now and then I find myself in a moment where I'm looking at what I have to do
Yeah.
and I'm looking at the time allotted to do those things and I'm
Yeah.
like, this doesn't work. Like there's
Yeah.
not, and part of the problem, or quote unquote, is the expectation that I have on myself at
Mm.
which level I'm going to execute on all of
Yeah.
those things.
Yeah.
So if I was willing to execute on some of those things at 50%, then I could probably get them all done. But
Yeah.
my nickname for most of my life was 110% Pete, and so um, so the problem is, where I get myself into trouble, I think, is the level of expectation
Mm.
uh, that I put upon myself in order to execute something.
Yes.
For example, like with your song,
Yeah.
it was like, I'm sure your expectation was like, okay, maybe it'll be a piano and a voice, but I was like,
Yeah.
no, I'm gonna get strings and I'm gonna
Of course.
like I'm gonna get like and so I but I don't regret doing those
Yeah.
things. It's like I want to I that's just how I want to show up.
Yeah.
But when
Yeah.
it happens that I um take on too much
Hmm.
and then I have a very high expectation for all those things that I've taken on
Yeah.
and sometimes I suffer because of that, whether
Mm.
that's
Yeah.
um losing sleep or being
Yeah.
stressed or feeling like you know catching myself uh not being as present for the people in my life and when
Yeah.
so I when that happens I need to kind of correct and
Yeah.
cancel some things
Yeah.
and get myself back on track.
That's awesome. That's an amazing, that there's so much wisdom there, Peter. And I love that piece about the fact that it's an ongoing process, right? It's a commitment to wanting to show up to achieve excellence, which is extraordinary, and understanding that takes work, right? It takes work to stay well. It's hard to be unwell, and it's also hard to be well. I think sometimes people often think it's like one's easier than the other. They're just different types of hard, and I just appreciate that. That's very cool. And the last question I'm going to ask you, actually, I have two questions because there's one question I know Jenna wants me to ask you, but the other question, Peter, what was your very first concert you ever went to?
My first concert ever was the Eagles, and the Hell Freezes Over tour, and I was at summer camp. I had been at summer camp right before on a canoe trip, and I was
Yeah.
sunburned to no end. But I went to this concert, and I remember Joe Walsh from
Mhm.
the Eagles
Yeah.
was given he had this magical person from side stage who would give him a new guitar with every
Yeah.
song, and I was like, how many guitars does he have? You know, and I was like, oh, my dream was like, I just want to be able to like have somebody just hand me new
And new
guitars
guitars.
every song.
Oh.
So I went with my sister to the Eagles. I also remember it was in Montreal. That's where I grew up, and
Yeah.
I remember like smelling this thing in the air. I was like, what is this gunky smell all around me? So, so there was
Oh, it's so good.
yeah,
That is so good.
those are my memories from that concert.
I think that's really extraordinary. And how old would you have been at that concert?
I was around like 10 or 11. I was pretty
Oh,
young.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
That is so cool. So the children and I are watching, and Jeff are watching a series, and that was one of the questions they asked. Like, hey, this guy asked the person, like, as an icebreaker, like, what was your first concert? And it was interesting, Peter, because I actually hadn't thought about what my first concert was,
Oh,
and I all of a sudden the next morning, as you know, I'm a huge fan of like morning routine. So I was walking my dogs and I started to think about like, okay, what was my first concert? And I tell you, as soon as my brain like went back to like that recollection of what my first concert was, I had like 20 minutes of just sitting with all of the new memories that I had unlocked in so long, and just looking back on such fondness on so many different levels. And I just love, again, that's the power of music and experience. Like as soon as I remembered the concert, I remembered the album, and I remember the artist, and like I just got this cascade of all of these extraordinary memories. And the artist was Richard Marx. I went to see Richard Marx, but this is what's so wild. I remember like my family, like we were super close, and we literally like traveled as a unit of 4, right? It was always mom, dad, brother, sister. Like that was like, we were like the Berenstein Bears, right? Mom, dad, brother, sister, no names, just this is how we move through time and space. And I remember being maybe about 10, same age as about you for your Eagles concert. And my mother said to me, Robyne, we have plans tonight. You and I are going to see a concert. And I was like, oh, okay. And then all of a sudden we got into the car, and I jumped into the back seat, Peter, because like that's you know how kids, you had your spot in the car. I jumped
yeah.
in, and then all of a sudden I looked up and my mom was in the driver's seat. And I was like, whoa, like this felt big. Like, why is my mom in the driver's seat? Because usually my dad used to always go, right? We traveled as a unit. And my mom looked at me and she goes, come on, darling, like come up to the front seat. This is just you and I. And I remember being like, it felt so rebellious, and not in any way that my dad ever controlled us in any way, but it just felt like these are 2 women who are like hitting the road to go to a show. And I had no idea where we were going. And we ended up going, and it was just in like King City in Toronto area. And we went into this concert, and okay, we walked in, and it was like all women from like, I would say 18 to 60, like there was not a single man in sight. And it was all of these women. And I remember sitting, right? We were sitting in this aisle, like sitting in our seats. And the first opening act came out, and it was Wilson Phillips. Right. So Wilson Phillips played, and it was like, everyone was like super chill, right? Like it was lovely. And we're like, oh, you know, I recognize some of the songs from the radio. But holy lifting, Peter, when Richard Marx walked on the stage, the women went absolutely like crazy. Like literally the floor was shaking, screams were happening. Like in my whole life, I'd never seen anything like it. And I like went to turn to my mom, like, cause I was actually nervous, like what the heck has happened to all these women? And my mom was on her feet. She was dancing and smiling. And it was like, oh my gosh, Peter, it was such a special moment to see her like living her best life, having fun, listening to Richard Marx. And then so yesterday morning, after I came home from the walk, when I came upon all of these first concert memories so fondly, I downloaded his album. And I tell you, I knew every song as soon as I heard the first few moments, right? As soon as I heard the first few moments, I knew what song was coming up next. And
Right.
oh my gosh, I basked yesterday in the glow of that memory, that fond memory, that music, that playlist. Oh gosh, like you as a musician, you have no idea how grateful we are for the gifts you so generously give. And I tell you, I wish I can send a note to Richard Marx and say, like, that was probably 31 years ago. And you have given me a gift 3 decades later to get a new memory again of my mom.
You'd send him the note.
Send him the note.
Wherever you go, whatever you do, I will be right here waiting for you.
Tell you, Peter.
Oh, how my heart breaks.
I can start to cry. Oh my goodness. Oh my God. Thank you. Peter, your time. It's such a generous gift of you to share your time with us today. Thank you so very much. I could talk to you for days. You are a gift and a talent, and I'm just so grateful our paths crossed and we had this collaboration and collision. So Peter, bright blessings to you in all that you do. And I'm so grateful.
Well, thank you, Robyne. And the last thing that I want to communicate back to you is that it's been very much a two-way street. And in fact, I feel, and you know, I know people say this, but I really mean it. I feel like I got more out of this exchange than I could have given to you. And I've said this to multiple people, that the creation of this song for you was maybe like the best musical experience of my life, and it was just one of the most affirming, just like doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing with exactly the person I'm supposed to be doing it with. It just felt like everything was like just as it should be. So you gave me a real gift by asking me to do this and by creating such a rich piece of work that I could just go in and be like a kid in a candy store, just mining for gold that was just plastered on all the walls. So thank you.
Thank you, my friend. Whew. Take good care, and we'll see you again very, very soon. Thanks, Peter.